The call came on a Friday. I remember because I had just finished reconciling a quarterly audit for a client when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, a 202 area code, Washington, D.C. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Patricia Holloway, Senior Trust Officer at Meridian Private Wealth Management. She told me, in the measured tone of someone who has delivered news like this before, that I was the sole named beneficiary of the estate of Eleanor Rose Whitfield, my grandmother, who had passed away 3 weeks earlier at the age of 84. 3 weeks earlier. I had not been told she was gone. $18,200,450. That is the number my sister decided was worth more than our relationship, more than the truth, more than a phone call saying your grandmother has died. Welcome back to Family Revenge Stories New, the channel where quiet people keep the receipts and family learns that silence is not the same thing as surrender. If you've ever watched someone smile at your face while erasing your name from a document, this story is for you. Drop a comment, subscribe, and let me tell you exactly what happened. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I do, because in this story, my profession was not background detail. It was the instrument of everything that followed. I am a forensic accountant. I have been for 13 years. I trace money the way other people read maps. I find where it went, how it moved, who touched it, and what they were trying to hide when they moved it. I have testified in federal court. I have sat across tables from people who were very certain their paperwork was clean. It was not. I know what a financial record says. I know what it means. And I know, with considerable precision, the ways people try to make money disappear before anyone starts asking questions. My grandmother, Eleanor, had built her money through 41 years of quiet, disciplined real estate investment in the Mid-South. She was not a woman who spoke about money. She was a woman who understood it. She kept her own books by hand until she was 79. She used the same accountant for 30 years and called him by his first name. She sent birthday cards with stamps she bought in bulk and stored in a ceramic jar on her kitchen counter. She was not a woman who needed managing. She was a woman who watched everything. I was the grandchild who answered her calls. My sister, Pauline, had a different approach to Eleanor. She performed. She drove Eleanor to appointments and made sure the photographs ended up on social media. She organized the holiday dinners and seated herself next to Eleanor and laughed loudly at her stories for the benefit of the room. When Eleanor's mobility declined in 2020 and she moved into an assisted living community in Tennessee, it was Pauline who coordinated the move, selected the facility, and had herself listed as Eleanor's primary healthcare proxy. My father, who had always found Pauline easier than me, called it devotion. Eleanor called me the week she moved in. She told me the place was pleasant, but that the pillows were flat and the television remote had too many buttons. I drove 6 hours to bring her the pillow from her own reading chair and a universal remote I had pre-programmed. We had dinner together in her room. She told me 3 things about Pauline that I did not repeat to anyone. I filed them in the part of my mind where I keep things that have no immediate use. Eleanor died on a Monday morning in September of last year. I learned about it 11 days later from her neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Harriet, who had seen the notice posted in the community newsletter and assumed I already knew. The service had been held the previous Thursday. There had been flowers. There had been a luncheon afterward at my parents' house. There had been, I later confirmed, a framed photograph display in the hallway, a visual biography of Eleanor's life, assembled by Pauline, in which I appeared in exactly one photograph, cropped partially behind a Christmas tree, from approximately 2009. I did not call Pauline. I took a screenshot of the community newsletter announcement with the timestamp visible. I printed it. I labeled it. I put it in a folder with Eleanor's last 3 birthday cards to me, which I had kept in a box in my office because they were handwritten and I am the kind of person who keeps things like that. Then I sat at my desk with my hands flat on the surface and said nothing out loud for a considerable amount of time. Patricia Holloway's call came 11 days after that. I met with her at the Meridian offices on a Tuesday morning. I wore the navy blazer I wear when I need people to understand I am not confused. I brought a notepad and nothing else. Patricia was professionally warm in the way that trust officers are when they expect to be delivering difficult news to someone in grief. She had a will on her desk flagged in 3 colors. She had a trust instrument that ran 52 pages. She had a box. Eleanor had retained Meridian and their affiliated estate counsel in 2017. She had drafted the documents. She had established the trust. And in 2022, 14 months before her death, she had amended everything. The amendment was dated March 11th, 2022. I have that date committed to memory. March 11th, 2022 was 9 days after Pauline had submitted paperwork to Eleanor's facility requesting authority to review Eleanor's financial statements on her behalf, citing concern for her grandmother's ability to manage her accounts. The request had been denied. Eleanor had personally contacted the facility director to ensure it was denied. 9 days after that, Eleanor had driven herself to the Meridian offices and revised her estate documents. The primary beneficiary of the entire trust, me. 100% of liquid holdings and investment accounts, totaling $14.7 million. The residential property and its contents, appraised at $2.9 million, to me with a single exception. A small parcel of land outside of Knoxville that Eleanor had owned since 1981, left to Harriet, her neighbor, because, as the document stated in Eleanor's own words, Harriet never wanted anything from me and never pretended otherwise. Pauline was named in the will. Eleanor had left her $10,000 and a note, sealed, to be delivered through counsel. In the box Patricia slid across the table was an envelope addressed to me in Eleanor's handwriting. A small brass key I recognized as belonging to a lockbox Eleanor had kept in her kitchen cabinet, and a single index card. On the index card, 3 words in my grandmother's script. She kept records. I did not open the envelope yet. I asked Patricia to walk me through everything. She did. And then she told me about the audit. Eleanor, it turned out, had not only amended her estate documents in March of 2022. She had also, quietly and without telling anyone in the family, commissioned an independent review of the joint checking account she had shared with Pauline since 2019, an account Pauline had suggested setting up so she could help manage the bills. Eleanor had given Patricia the results of that review on the same day she signed the trust amendment. She had asked Patricia to hold them. Patricia handed me a bound document. 41 pages. I am a forensic accountant. I read those 41 pages the way other people watch a car accident. Slowly, unable to look away, already understanding before I finished what I was looking at. Over 31 months, $224,000 had moved out of that joint account in transactions that did not correspond to any of Eleanor's household expenses, medical costs, or personal expenditures. The transfers were structured, almost always between $4,000 and $7,500, spaced irregularly, using descriptions like household miscellaneous and family support, and on 4 occasions, simply gift. Eleanor's actual household expenses were separately tracked in a ledger she had maintained herself. The ledger was in the box. Her handwriting. Every legitimate expense accounted for. The $224,000 was not in it anywhere. I stayed in that office until nearly 5 p.m. I read the trust instrument in full. I read the amendment. I read the audit. I noted the dates. I requested certified copies of everything. Patricia had anticipated this and had already prepared a second set. When I left, I sat in my car in the parking structure for 7 minutes. I know it was 7 minutes because I watched the clock. Then I drove home. That night I opened the envelope. Eleanor's letter was 4 paragraphs. She explained that she had noticed the transfers beginning in month 3 and had said nothing, choosing instead to document. She wrote that she had not wanted to believe it and had needed time to be certain. She wrote that by the time she was certain, she had decided the most useful thing she could do was ensure the record was complete and the documents were airtight. The last paragraph said, "You will know what to do with this. You have always known what numbers are actually saying. I trusted you to listen to me. Now I am trusting you to make sure I am heard." I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope. I put it in the folder. The first letter went out 3 weeks later, sent by Meridian's affiliated counsel, formally notifying Pauline of the trust's terms and the distribution schedule. A second letter, from a separate attorney I had engaged, notified her that the joint account transaction history had been referred for review. That letter used specific language. Pauline called me 40 minutes after it was delivered. She did not begin the call with condolences. She began with the phrase, "This is completely insane." I let her talk. She talked for 4 minutes. Then I said, "I have the ledger, Pauline. Eleanor's own ledger. I have 41 pages. I have 31 months of transaction records. I have the dates." She was quiet. I said, "I'll see you in probate court if you'd like to discuss this further." She said she was going to contest the will on the grounds of undue influence. I thanked her for letting me know and ended the call. The contest was filed. It was reviewed. And then something happened that I had anticipated but had not seen documented quite so clearly in my 11 years of professional practice. Pauline's own legal team, in preparing their challenge, subpoenaed the account records, the same account records that were already in my 41-page audit. They received the complete transaction history. I do not know exactly what conversation happened between Pauline and her attorneys after that review. What I know is that the contest was withdrawn 14 days later. The withdrawal was filed quietly, with no accompanying statement. The trust distributed in full. $14.7 million, less taxes and legal fees. The residential property transferred. The Knoxville parcel went to Harriet, who called me on a Thursday evening and who cried so steadily through the call that I had to set the phone down twice and collect myself before responding. My parents received nothing directly from the trust. Eleanor had chosen not to include them. They received the knowledge of what the documents said, and they have not called me since. Pauline did not contest again. She called me once, 5 months later. She said she needed me to understand that she had been struggling financially and that Eleanor had known. I told her that I understood Eleanor had known. I told her that Eleanor had made her decisions with full knowledge and careful documentation, and that I respected those decisions. I told her I was not in a position to revisit them. She hung up. That was the last conversation we have had. The brass key opened a lockbox in Eleanor's kitchen cabinet, which Patricia's team had secured as part of the estate. Inside were 42 years of personal financial records, maintained by Eleanor's hand, every year in a separate manila envelope, labeled and dated. I had them archived properly and stored. I kept one envelope, the year I was born, because Eleanor had written a note on the inside flap. 2 sentences. I keep it in the same box as her birthday cards. I established a scholarship in Eleanor's name at the community college where she had taken her first accounting course before it was common for women in her county to do such things. The Eleanor R. Whitfield Scholarship in Financial Literacy, awarded annually to a non-traditional student returning to education. The first recipient was a 47-year-old woman who was rebuilding after a difficult divorce. I did not announce it publicly. I made a donation to an elder financial protection nonprofit that provides free legal and financial review services to seniors whose accounts show early warning signs of exploitation. Eleanor's situation had shown me, with uncomfortable specificity, what happens when a person's own careful records are the only thing standing between them and someone with access and a plan. The remainder I invested. Conservatively. In writing. With witnesses. Here is what I want you to understand about this story. I did not act from anger. Anger is not a tool I find reliable. I acted because a woman I loved had spent 2 years quietly, meticulously building a record, and then trusted me to know what to do with it. She had trusted that the structure would hold, and that someone would be there on the other side who understood what the numbers were actually saying. My family had mistaken my quietness for absence. They saw someone who did not argue at dinners and assumed someone who would not act. They saw someone who came and went without drama and assumed someone who had nothing prepared. Eleanor never made that mistake. She knew what I did. She knew how I read things. She called me not to perform care but to actually talk, about the flat pillows, about the television remote, about 3 things she had noticed about Pauline that she never said out loud to anyone but me. What they tried to take was not the money. The money was the instrument. What they tried to take was the final, documented, legally witnessed statement of a woman who had spent 84 years watching and counting and deciding. A woman who had determined, with the full clarity that 20 years of careful records provides, what she believed and who she trusted. I was not going to allow that statement to be overwritten. Not by pressure. Not by a framed photo display in a hallway that cropped me out. Not by a contest filed by someone who had not read the room carefully enough to realize that the room had 41 pages of documented evidence already waiting. The document said what it said. I made sure it was heard. If this story reminded you that the person at the table who says the least is not the person to underestimate, hold on to that. If it reminded you that a person who keeps their own books and labels their own envelopes and says nothing out loud while watching everything is a very specific kind of prepared, hold on to that too. Eleanor kept records. She just called them ledgers. If you want more stories about quiet people and the documents they leave behind, subscribe to Family Revenge Stories New. Drop a comment below. I read them all. And if you know someone who needs to hear that calm is a strategy and not a weakness, send this to them. I'll see you in the next one.